Welcome, 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 welcome. Yes. All right. Charge it up. Charge it up. Get it going good. Why do we have such static? If you have your mic on, just mute it right now, please. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Sunday Experience, August 23rd, 2026. This is the practical spiritual living aspect of the Sunday Experience. And today we're talking about living from within. This is week 4, living from the center. And we always like to remind you of the fact that there is an infinite source available to everyone. It is there for each who seek it, no matter their race, gender, or religion. Believe what you may, but you should know that the source of the universe is also the source of each of us. Therefore, the principle supporting the stars is the principle supporting and available to each of us. As I declare this statement, in the first person, I am declaring it for all. I am open and receptive to this divine living principle. Father, Mother God, I am grateful. This is my declaration. This is my truth. And as I accept it, so it becomes, and all is well and well indeed. As I accept it, so it becomes. That is such a key because it is my acceptance that makes it so in my life. Good morning and welcome to Unity of Chicago's South, the Sunday Experience. I'm your guide, Reverend R. Ken. And over the past several weeks, we've been exploring what it means to live from within. We began with the inner kingdom, not something we're trying to reach, but a spiritual reality already present. Then we entered the inner house. And last week we considered the veil, those things that can interfere with our awareness of what has always been present. And today I want to move from awareness to practical spiritual living. I want to move from awareness to practice. You say, well, why? See, it's one thing to say, the kingdom is within me. But it's a whole nother thing to live as though that's true. As I accept it, so it becomes. So today our question is, what does it mean to live from the center? The question becomes to each individual, where are you living from? You see, all of us have a center from which we operate. The question is whether we choose it consciously. Sometimes we're living from fear. Sometimes we're living from yesterday's disappointment. And sometimes we're living from what somebody said about us or to us. Sometimes we're living from what other news that comes into our consciousness, the daily news that invades us. Sometimes we're living from the last email that we opened. And sometimes we're simply living from whatever happened 5 minutes ago. So the question definitely becomes, where am I living from? You see, when we live from that 5 minutes ago, what we're living from is reaction. It's something outside that happens, and something inside immediately responds and follows it. But living from within offers another possibility. The circumstances don't necessarily change, things still happen, but the place from which we meet them does change. There's a moment in the Gospel of Mark that I've always found rather interesting. Jesus says to the disciples, as they're crossing the sea when a storm arises, he's asleep. The disciples panic, and then Jesus again is asleep. Now, metaphysically, I don't think we have to make this primarily a story about meteorology, about the weather. It's a story about consciousness in the middle of circumstances. You see, the storm is real, the waves are real, the storm is real, the waves are real, the things that happen in our lives are real, the incidents are real. The frightened disciples are real, the frightened thoughts are real. But the storm outside does not automatically become the storm inside. That's centeredness. Centeredness does not mean nothing is happening. Centeredness does not mean nothing is happening. Centeredness does not mean nothing's happening. It means that what's happening doesn't automatically determine what happens within me. Automatically, that's the key here. See, it is going to touch it. I just don't want to automatically react every time I see red. Viktor Frankl, his work repeatedly emphasized that even when the circumstances restrict us, incarceration, there remains a human capacity to choose our attitude and response. In the midst of, we still have the right to choose. The right to choose. That's an important distinction. You see, we do not control everything that happens, but neither are we merely helpless products of everything that happens. There is an interior space, and spiritual practice helps us become conscious of that space. Pauli Murray was an advocate for human rights and lived through extraordinary barriers involving race and gender, yet continued working toward transformation in law, civil rights, women's rights, and eventually ministry. One thing Murray's life demonstrates is that inner conviction and outer circumstances don't always agree. I want more. I want to be more. I want joy. I want happiness. I'm in a terrible situation. But this is my desire, and I must fight for this desire beyond the circumstances. Sometimes the world around us says, no, 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 no. And sometimes deeper within says, keep going. Now understand this, that's not denial of circumstances. That's refusing to allow circumstances to become the sole authority over our identity. And that is part of living from the center. Understand this, the center isn't passivity. This is important. See, living from the center does not mean sitting peacefully while everything around us falls apart. Centeredness is not passivity. It actually gives us a better foundation for action. It actually gives us a better foundation for action. You say, how can that be? See, when I react from fear, not speaking of you, because I know you don't, but when I do react from fear, my choices are often about escaping the feeling that is bothering me because of the fear. But when I can get to that center, when I can respond from centeredness, I can ask, what does this moment actually require of me? See, that's the action that comes from centeredness that is not passive. Sometimes it requires patience. I just gotta wait it through. I just gotta let the storm pass. Sometimes it requires courage. I gotta hold my ground in the midst of. Sometimes it just, no. Sometimes I must speak. Sometimes I must listen. Sometimes it's time to leave. And sometimes it's time to settle in and stay. The center does not always tell us to be quiet, but it does help us become clear. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful idea of equanimity. Now, equanimity isn't indifference. It isn't, I don't care what happens. It's the capacity to remain present without being thrown completely off balance by every changing condition. Oh, I'm here today. It's hot. Oh, it's cold. Oh, it's hot. It's cold. It's not like dressing properly for the weather. It's knowing that you're properly clothed within for any weather. You see, because pleasure comes, we get joy, don't we? But then there's pain. It comes too. You see, sometimes people say, you're the greatest. You're fantastic. And sometimes people say, you know, that work of yours is pretty sloppy. Sometimes we succeed in our mission, we succeed in our goal, and sometimes we fall flat on our, I should say me, right? Because you don't fail. No, sometimes failure comes. And instead of allowing each and every one to define who I am, who you are, when we're dealing with centeredness, we are cultivating an inner stillness in the midst of. Now, in our practice in New Thought, it kind of describes it as becoming established in spiritual awareness. In some of the orthodoxies, being centered in prayer. Different languages, but the same invitation. Right now, let's take a little centering practice. A centering practice. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, let's create a scenario and then walk through it. Let's do something like, actually, how do we do this on Tuesday afternoon when someone has just gotten on our very last nerve, knowing that never happens to you, but it certainly occurs to me occasionally. It pops in my life once in a while. Try this. The next time your last nerve is strained, before you respond, pause. Just pause. No prayer, no meditation, no mantra, just pause. And then ask yourself, what am I reacting to? What is it I'm reacting to? And then ask yourself one other question. What am I feeling? And then the final question. Who do I choose to be in this moment? Do I choose to be a reactionary terror getting back in the face of the person that's in my face? Who do I choose to be? Because see, that's the choice that Franco's talking about. We have a choice, even in the situation of imprisonment. We have a choice. So when we ask that question of ourselves, who do I choose to be in this moment? Who do I choose to be in this moment? It's that's the question that changes everything. Because the focus changes from what do they deserve? They're all up on me. They're on my last nerve. Not how do I win this situation? Not how do I make this feeling go away? But who do I choose to be? When we ask that question of ourselves, it returns the authority to our center. I want to let you know, those of you who are joining us on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch, I'd like to hear from you. So I'm going to give you a question, a sentence rather, that I'd like you to finish if you would. I feel most centered when I'm in meditation, when I'm in prayer, when I'm alone, when I'm at work, when I'm in front of my computer, whatever that when is, would you just, drop that in? Maybe it's prayer, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's music or walking or silence or water or talking with someone you trust. Maybe it's any of that, but would you put your answer in the comments, please? And I'll bring some of those responses into our conversation, as we're able to do so. And it's important to understand that wherever you are joining us from, you are part of the room. And here's where today's practical spiritual living begins, connecting with what we're going to explore in Sunday conversations. If I become centered, what happens to my thinking? If I become centered, what happens to my thinking? And if my thinking changes, what happens to my experience? You see, that's where James Allen enters our conversation today. But before we get there, I want to leave you with this. Living from within isn't withdrawing from life. We see the monks and so forth. We see them. Yes. And we say, well, I could be like that if I could only get to that monastery. Well, I didn't have to do anything but just live a spiritual life. Or many times there are folks that think about, if I was just back in the days with the prophets, and they could be under the stars in the desert and no TV and no nothing. Just me and God. It's not withdrawing from life because most of us can't. It is learning to meet life from a deeper place. You see, the storm could be happening. And the question becomes whether I'm standing while it happens. Where am I at while it happens? Am I standing, and where am I standing while the storm is going on? This is where I like to take it to the new thought. Sometimes when we enter the practice, the metaphysical practice, We hear denial, affirmation, denial, affirmation, denial, affirmation. I'm in a class myself, and we spend a lot of time on denial, affirmation as we study Charles Fillmore and his teachings. What I want to say is that this is not about that. This is about saying, yeah, it's happening. Oh, yeah, it's happening. But what tools do I have to react in a way that I can appreciate myself after the situation has died down? What is it that I can do while it's happening? I know it's happening. How do I not give in to it? How do I not succumb to it? You see. And you say, well, you said denials and affirmations. The key to understand the denial is that one of my instructors told us this in one of the advanced classes. I mean, we heard the denial, affirmation, yeah. Okay. And she finally said, I don't know if she meant to say it, but she finally said the truth. I'm denying that whatever the situation is has power over me. What a wake-up call that was. It has no power over me because there's within me a centeredness that I can touch upon to pull my power up in the midst of. Where am I standing while it's happening? Yes. Where am I standing while it's happening? So understand, I'm not saying denials are not important. I'm saying the understanding what the denial is. What the heck am I denying? I'm not denying that ain't there. But that doesn't have power over me because there is within me something that I can pull forth, that I can bring forth, a power that I can bring forth. You say, well, that power is it overcome? No, don't worry about it overcome. I just need to bring forth the power that's within me. In the midst of, that's such a key. In the midst of the storm, peace be still. And the storm quiets. The storm is real, waves are real. We talked about that. So it's not denying. Let's understand that it's so important. It's not denying that it's happening. It's denying that it controls me. It's denying that it has power over me. At this moment, at this time, I might feel pretty bad, but at the end of the day, am I going to stand in my truth? Because that makes all the difference. And how do I get to my truth? I get to my truth because there's within me a power. Within you, there's a power. There's a power within you, and that's the centeredness that we're talking about. You say, well, I talk to a friend, and I talk to this, and I do this, and I do that. No one's saying that you shouldn't do any of that. But at the end of the day, you're not walking it alone, but you're experiencing it alone. And when we understand that I'm experiencing this alone, then I need to have a friend. And when nobody's there to be called, where's my friend? That friend is within me. That friend is within me. Wow. Yes. Do you feel that energy? Do you feel that energy? Do you feel that energy? Just take a moment. Just take a moment and just quiet yourself and just try to feel the energy. Just feel it. Just let's be quiet just for a moment. Yeah. Yes. Wow. I hope that there's some joy that you found in this energy today. Let's take a Let's take a look at one of the questions that came in on the chat. I'm most centered when I remember that I am always that. That I'm always that. Let's check and see if we have any comments that came in on our other system. When I realize that I'm always that. Such a powerful thing when I'm always that. Well, we're getting ready for an exciting time, very exciting time, very exciting time, very exciting time because in Sunday conversation is spiritual on my mind, but in Sunday conversations, we're opening a whole new chapter. And it doesn't matter whether you've read the material or not, it has been available on our website, and we will continue to do that. Make the readings available to you on the site if you choose to read it. But understand, it doesn't matter whether you read it or not. We will give enough information out during the course of the conversation that you can be a part of, because the reading is just the beginning of the conversation. It's not a class. It's just the beginning of the conversation. And it's the hope that with Sunday conversation, because we're focused on a particular idea, that you will give your input to the idea, that you will share your thoughts, because it's not about any one person, not even one author. It's not about them. It's not. It's about a collective consciousness. You say, well, what does that mean, a collective consciousness? I would say that probably no one on this stream, no matter where they are, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, uh, Instagram, whatever it is, I doubt very seriously if they have voted for the situation that we're in right now in this country. But there was a collective consciousness that was moving through our country. It was more than one. It was one that said, yes, I believe a liar. And there was another one saying, because you didn't do it the way I wanted you to do it, I'm just not going to participate. That's an example of a collective consciousness. You see, one person saying that means nothing, or whoever we use for reading means nothing. It's what we say about that person, about what they said, or about what they say. So it's so important that we take a look at whatever's being offered and comment, because someone can learn from what you have to say. So with that said, I want to thank you for coming to this part of the Sunday experience called the practical spiritual living aspect of it. And for those of you that can stay from whatever platform you might be on, for those of you that can stay, I say we take a short break as we normally do. Get some coffee, get your juice, get your water, get some eggs and bacon if you can get it that quickly. And come on back. We have a short pause, about 5 minutes, and then we get into today's Sunday conversation featuring one of the writings of James, Allen. And again, remember, if you've read it or you haven't read it, you are welcome to come. We're going to give you enough as we go along that you can be a part of it. But we want to put another voice on the table. So, and also, if you don't agree with what is being said, please voice that too, because that's important too. We're going to question what he says, and those of you that are not on our platform with us here, please use the comments and be a part of the conversation. You are part of the room. And if something raises a question for you, put that in the comments too. So those of you joining us, what we call the upper room here, can, again, speak directly to what we're saying. You can add to the conversation that way. And remember, today's big question is, how much power does thought really have? How much power does thought really have? So we'll be back in a few minutes. Be peaceful. Okay, we are back. We are back. We are back with Sunday Conversation. Hope you saw the question. The question is very simple. Huh? How much, let's try it again and shoot you with it. How much power does thought really have? So I want to welcome some of you back and I want to greet some of you for the first time uh, this Sunday for this part of the Sunday experience. We call this part Sunday Conversations. And this is the first week of something new. Each week, or let's say as appropriate, we'll make a reading available before Sunday Conversation. The reading is intended to give us another voice to encounter. It doesn't give us the answer. That's so important. The reading isn't the lesson, it's the beginning of the conversation. And the first voice that we're bringing to the table this week is James Allen. Now, you may have heard that name before, James Allen. James Allen is best known as a little book called As a Man Thinketh. Some of you have heard that phrase, but the author of that book is James Allen. And in our selection is From the Path of Prosperity, another book that he wrote. He makes some very strong claims about thought. And basically, he's arguing that thought is a force and that learning to direct our inner forces is essential to self mastery. Self mastery, self mastery. So he's saying that self mastery comes from the inside out. Hmm. So that's the idea we're going to put on the table this morning. That's the idea that we're going to put on the table this morning. Yeah. Let's take a look at what he has to say. When you say thought is powerful, what is actually meant by that? What is actually meant by that? So, how is it powerful? In other words, we probably don't have much trouble accepting that thoughts have consequences, right? Thoughts have consequences. See, a thought can affect a mood. A thought can affect attention. A thought can influence our choices. And repeated thoughts can become beliefs. And beliefs can affect our behavior. And we should know that behavior can certainly influence circumstances. But Allen goes further. He treats thought almost as a force operating upon life itself. So let's begin right there. The question was on the table. When you say thought is powerful, what do you actually mean? Does thought change circumstances? Does it primarily change us? Or is it some combination of the two? Now, those on team here in the upper room, let's hear from you. If you have something that you can add to it, just unmute yourself and shoot it on out there. And those of you on Facebook and YouTube, any of the other social platforms, you can put your questions or perspectives in the chat and we'll take a look and see how our system works in gathering those questions up. Yes. Does it change the circumstance, or does it change us, or does it change both in some kind of combination? I have a thought. I'm sure you do too. Why don't you share it by dropping it in the comment, or again, just unmuting yourself and saying the words. It changes us for sure. The circumstances pretty much are the circumstances, but how I see the circumstances affects how the circumstances affect me. Hmm. And an idea that I find so powerful in the new thought arena is this. When does empowerment become blame? When does empowerment, my ability to change my thought, to think a thought, become blame? Now, what is meant by that? Here's what Allen gives us something worth challenging. He makes extremely broad connections between thought and outward conditions. And again, this is where New Thought itself sometimes gets into trouble trying to explain to non-New Thought people what is meant by that. There is a tremendous difference between saying, my consciousness influenced how I experienced and responded to life, and saying everything that happens to me happened because I thought it. Hmm. Big difference. How do you feel about that? Which camp are you in? My thought created everything. Everything I experienced came from my thought. Everything I experienced came from my thought. Or saying my consciousness, it does influence how I experience whatever happens to life, me in life, or everything happens to me because I thought. There's so many people in our practice seem to be of the opinion that I thought it. I made it happen. And if I hadn't have thought that thought, then this wouldn't have happened to me. Hmm. Understand, those are not the same teachings. And you say, well, what? Why? Understand, there are systems. Systems. There is injustice. There are people sitting right now in detention camps that are suffering injustice. There is disease, COVID. There are natural events, earthquakes, hurricanes. And there are choices other people make that are in your life. There are circumstances over which we have no individual control, or a little at best. And the thing with New Thought, that if we're not careful, the interpretation of the teaching that is intended to empower people can become of blaming people for their suffering. I want to take an aside just for a moment. And in one of the classes, they mentioned a minister. I'm not going to say what particular practice, although it was New Thought. They said this person is in the congregation. They say, I'm encountering this, blah, 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 whatever it was. How did my thinking do that? And the minister says, you thought it. Really? I thought it. Now, where I differ with Alan is the fact that our thoughts have an impact on those things that happen to us, the attractions that we make. But then there is that with outside of our thoughts. And I think that's the balance. If I had to share, or I'm sharing, that's the balance I would come up with. That yes, I can create a lot of calamity in my life. I can create a lot of stuff that smells pretty bad. But not everything that happens to me is because I thought it. So how do I balance it? How would you say you balance it? If you have a comment you're on Facebook, YouTube, drop it in the comment, Twitch, drop it in the comment. If I can get to it, I would be more than happy to share it a little bit later. That's not where we want to be, where I thought it, so that's why it happened. It's only my thinking that can make it happen. I was a proponent of the fact that we can probably trace whatever happens in your life to something that you thought. But my thinking put me in a position to encounter that. Is that what you're saying? Because if you're saying that to me, then that's different. Yes, I think I heard someone unmic themselves. Is that correct? Go ahead, please. Welcome to the conversation. Hmm. No power. Okay. Thank you for that, Sharon. Now, I was told a couple of weeks ago that sometimes the people on Facebook and YouTube cannot hear our conversation. And what I want to say to you on Facebook or YouTube, I love for you to be in the conversation. I know you hear me, but I love for you to be in the conversation. And one of the ways that you can assure yourself of being in the conversation is to be a part of, come on the platform with us and you can hear. Now, I'm not saying that I checked it out. Somebody just said, I don't know, there might have been a bad day where uh, there was something going on with the audio. I'm really not sure. But if that is the case, I want to let you know that you have missed a wonderful answer and a wonderful explanation of what someone feels about thoughts, what someone feels about thoughts. So it's okay to come through Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, whatever it may be, but to participate in the actual conversation, it's a great place to be on the platform with us. And you can always get the link at unityocs.org. And there's a link up there so you can become a part of the conversation. But comments are certainly welcome. We have created a situation where we can aggregate, they say, your comments if you're outside of our platform. And if you drop a comment or question in, we'll get to them as we can get to them during the course of our session. Hmm. As the course of our session. Uh, we're going to continue on with this part of us Sunday conversation. Let me add another perspective to the question. Alan's most practical advice, and this is something that I found rather useful. He describes someone confronting a serious problem and becoming consumed by fear and anxiety. His advice isn't think positively and the problem was going to disappear. Instead, he kind of moved where our last commenter made gave his opinion, gave his thoughts, and he said, "Get quiet, move attention away from any anxiety, move into a state of calm." and then re-examine the issue. See, that's different because anxiety, believing that the clouds are part of the sky in the scenario we were given, can narrow our perspective. Yeah. And when we're highly reactive, we don't necessarily see all the options. Mm. And that takes us suddenly back to our practical living, practical spiritual living from today, living from the center. Maybe stillness doesn't magically solve every problem. Maybe stillness just helps us meet the problem with a different quality of consciousness. Hmm. We have one more question we want to put before the board, before the table, before the streamers. Have you ever discovered that the answer to a problem became clearer after you stopped struggling with it for a while? After you let it go, after you put it down? And if so, what do you think changed? The problem or you? Yeah, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, put it in the comment and we'll get to it as we can. And of course, if I can't get to it today, we will answer those comments and those questions as the week progresses. Yeah. Yes. Seems like we have another conversation. Come on with it. Thank you for that. Oh boy, I'm telling you, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, you want to go over to the website and make sure that you're on the platform next week and you can hear the conversation and the ideas come. But if you are kind of hooked on those places, drop a comment, drop a question, and we'll see how that works, how we can get to them and share those with others. You know what Alan has done repeatedly? He uses the language of controlling thought. And I think I understand what he's getting at when he says that, but I'm not sure control is always the best word for the day. So, because if you try to tell yourself, don't think about it, what happens? For me, you think about it usually, right? Perhaps the goal isn't to prevent unwanted thoughts from appearing, like those clouds that the Reverend spoke about. Perhaps spiritual maturity involves deciding which thoughts, which clouds receive authority. You see, fear may appear, you know, but I don't have to give fear the steering wheel. Anger may appear. I can listen to what it's telling me without allowing anger to determine my behavior. Doubt may appear, and I can acknowledge it without making doubt my identity. So perhaps we move from controlling thought toward consciously directing attention. Is my attention on that, the fear, the doubt, or is my attention on there is that within me that is greater than? Wow. You see, there is a difference between controlling your thoughts and choosing which thoughts receive your attention. And that's a hard one. Again, in our practice, and particularly in New Thought, some of us come in and it's about control. I don't want to think that erase, deny, a whole litany of internal conversation. Sometimes it's external people. Deny, erase. But that thought there, no, it's there, but no. I'm not entertaining you today. You can't come into my consciousness house. Not today. I'd like to know what some of the folks on the social media think. Drop it in the chat. Now we want to move into this inner house connection that we've talked so much about in practical spiritual living. And it's something that I found enjoyable with Alan's writing. Near the end of the chapter, he uses the image of a householder deciding which thoughts are admitted into what he calls the mansion of his soul, the mansion of their soul. Now we spent some weeks talking about that inner house. I didn't choose James Allen because of that phrase, but there it was. Did I attract it to me? Or was it just out in the ether and I ran across it? Maybe the question isn't whether thoughts knock on the door. They will. The question is, who has the authority over the house? Because I could have said, no, I won't use this. I will use something else. Understand that every thought that knocks does not deserve a room. Every thought that knocks does not deserve a room. I want to take this Allen thing, or what he wrote, one step further and pose this question to everyone. Maybe this question is the deepest question, and that is, what am I thinking? Maybe it is from what state of consciousness instead. Not what am I thinking, but what state of consciousness does this thought come from? Where the heck is this thought coming from? You see, fear produces thoughts. Scarcity produces thoughts. Love produces thoughts. Possibility produces thoughts. Reaction produces thoughts. Centeredness produces thoughts. So transformation may be deeper than replacing. Something bad is going to happen with something wonderful is going to happen. You say, what's the difference? I choose wherever something bad is going to happen came from. I choose to go to my center and replace it with something wonderful is going to happen. That's what I want to plant in my consciousness. That's what I want to plant in my consciousness, to be replanted in my subconscious. Different lesson, another time. You see, maybe transformation. Maybe it happens when we connect with that place within us. And that's how we change the thought. Because we planted it, somehow it got into our center. Whatever, however it got there. Somebody said something, we listened, we believed it planted. So that thought of scarcity, that thought of fear is there. It's not a thought we want to happen. So we replace it with happiness is going to happen. We understand that it got planted in that center some kind of way. But we know the antidote. The antidote is planting a new thought in that consciousness. Practical spiritual living asks, where am I living from? Spiritual conversation asks, how does where I'm living from affect how I'm thinking? Now, before we bring this home, I want to make sure that anyone online, whether they're online today, which is Sunday, the August 23rd, or if they find this on YouTube or Facebook or somewhere later on, know that they too can be a part of the platform. There's no charge, there's no tricks, there's no behind the curtain. It's very simple. Go over to unityocs.org, click on the link to our platform Upper Room and on Sundays, and be admitted and join the conversation in that way. But understand this, even if you choose not to do that, a question or comment in the comment box will also be addressed as they become available and as our time becomes available. It doesn't matter if you're participating here or there. Your voice belongs in this room. And I want to wind it up with James Allen. He's given us a provocative first reading today. We don't have to accept everything and every claim that he makes. In fact, I hope we don't approach these readings in that way where they're right and my thoughts are different. And I want to remind you, which I think I neglected, the readings are available on our website, unityocs.org. So even after we conclude today, whatever day it might be that you're seeing this, you can go over to the website and get the reading. And again, it's not behind the wall. It's not behind the paywall. You go over, you click on readings, you download it. Simple stuff. I know in this time of this season of life in America, it's hard to believe that it's not a trick. They're not trying to get your email address or this. If we want your email address, we'll let you know we want your email address. It's that simple. What we want to set up is an open line of communication where you know what we're doing and you can participate at will. Know that there will be weeks that the authors might say everything you believe. And you'll say, whoa, I didn't know. And there's some weeks that the authors are going to say stuff, you're going to say, you know what, that ain't, no, I'm not buying into that. That's a good thing. Because Sunday Conversations, part of the Sunday Experience, isn't about collecting answers. It's about becoming willing to ask better questions. That's what it's all about. I want to say to you that if there's such a thing as no homework, that you do this on your own. What idea did James Allen present that you agreed with most, and which idea would you say, heck, he do know? And then, what thought or mental habit are you willing to stop giving so much authority in this upcoming week? Which one are you trying to say or will say to, not today, Joe, not today, Joan, not today. And we have to have our soul inquiry. And those of you that are not familiar with the soul inquiry, it's very simple. We ask the question, we inquire. It's called soul inquiry. So we're asking the soul. And the question is, from what state of consciousness am I choosing to think, respond, and live? From what state of consciousness am I choosing to think, respond, and live? Remember, we allow the answer to come from that deeper spiritual consciousness. And we allow it to come in its own time. And the last thing I want to leave you with, I want to say thank you for all of you that have participated in this maiden journey of the new format for spiritual Sunday conversations. When something happens that pulls you away from reaction, try to just pause. Just pause. And go back to center and ask, where am I living from? In this moment, where am I living from? You see, I say that because maybe the real power, isn't simply in changing our thoughts. Perhaps it begins in changing our relationship to the consciousness from which those thoughts come from. I want to thank you so much for being here for Sunday Conversation, a part of Unity of Chicago South's The Sunday Experience. And until next time, remember that no matter what platform brought you here, what day or time brought you to this space, your voice belongs here. Next week's reading will be available on our website, unityocs.org, on no later than Tuesday. And for updates and reminders, you may text Sunday, the word Sunday, to 564-238-2890. That's 564-234-2890 for reminders. And on behalf of Unity of Chicago South Beyond Wall Spiritual Community, know that you're loved by your source and there's nothing you can do about it. This is Reverend R. Ken bidding you namaste.